Hello, this is Joyce Latimer from Virginia Tech, and today we're going to talk about using PGRs on perennials with a focus on increasing pot fill with Configure. I'd like to thank Fine Americas for sponsoring this video and for e-GRO for facilitation. So when we talk about Configure, we're talking about benzyladenine, or BA. It's a Fine Americas product that is labeled for increasing branching. Works on a lot of our herbaceous perennials, both the basal branchers and some of those that require branching on the stems. If we apply it early, we can increase pot fill. And this is especially evident with some of our basal branchers, such as this Lobelia cardinalis. You can see on our control we only have about 4 stems or 4 branches in that pot. You still see a lot of soil. This is at 2 weeks after Configure application. The Configure pot, on the other hand, is much more filled with plant material. We have more branches, gone up to 13 branches in this pot, and very little of the media is evident. This again is at 2 weeks after Configure application. And if we look at these plants at 4 weeks after application, you can see that the Configure treated plants have not added any additional branches, but those branches have filled out and we have much more symmetry and a much better pot fill with the Configure application as compared to the controls. We saw similar results with Penstemon digitalis, Husker Red. You can see our control on the left with only 6 branches. However, our Configure on the right only had 8 branches. So in addition to the additional branches, the 2 additional branches, we also had a lot more plant development, leaf development, and growth in these Configure treated plants. So again, a much more marketable plant because of that improved pot fill. We've done a couple of studies looking at the timing of the Configure application on the final number of basal branches in the finished plants. This example is Echinacea white swan with the untreated plants on the left only having about 2 basal branches in that quart pot. On the right, we have plants that were treated with 600 parts per million Configure, and regardless of the timing of that application, they all finished with between 6 and 7 branches in that quart pot. You can see these plants along the bottom. These are at 8 weeks after application. The Configure was applied either at planting, 0 weeks after planting, or at 1, 2, 3, or 4 weeks after planting. So you can see at 8 weeks they all did the job. However, if we look at these plants at 4 weeks after potting, you can see that the Configure had a greater effect the earlier it was applied. So the plants that were treated at planting at 0 weeks after planting or at 1 week after planting had the greatest number of branches and the best pot fill at 4 weeks after potting. That's great, you get good pot fill, but what you also need to consider is the root development of those pots. Just because they look good, they may not quite be ready for sale. But getting good pot fill early in production can certainly enhance the marketability of your plants, clear them off the bench earlier for sales. So in summary, early applications of Configure increases branching, we knew that. Especially works well for basal branching perennials, and that results in earlier pot fill. So more marketability, less time on the bench, and quicker sales. Thanks again to Fine Americas and e-GRO, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a great day.